sections. And this is going to be the case for people who are not very much used to write down on the computer. For people who are basically working at the office and who are very much, let's say, assiduous writers through keyboard, well, I guess that this is not going to be that much new, apart from, of course, the obvious difference that you're going to be writing in English, right? But I would say that that is the greatest difficulty, because apart from that, you're going to notice this is actually very easy, and especially the first task that we're going to be meditating tonight. All right. Well, let us start them. We are already live. So let me just stream here my screen as well so that you can see it. Well, great. Here we are. So as I was mentioning you, tonight we're going to discuss the writing section and the task number 1 of the writing section. All right. So let us start. Great. There we are. Well, the writing section. Okay. Tonight we're going to discuss the first task, as I told you. And well, let us start with some general aspects. I think that, well, it's very important to remember this, even if you already knew about this general aspects a little bit, but nonetheless, it's always important, right, to come back to the basics. So let us talk about this very quickly. The TOEFL IBT test writing section is designed to measure your ability to write in English in an academic setting. And you're expected to be able to present your ideas in a clear, well-organized manner. Well, as I told you, of course, this is very important because it doesn't matter what motive you postulate for taking this exam. Writing is always an important area for any person receiving your scores and, of course, judging them. Happens that when you are studying in the, well, in American universities or European universities, most of your homeworks are going to be, of course, well, summaries, articles, essays. And of course, that requires you to write down on the computer, right, through the keyboard, because, well, nowadays it's very much difficult to find homeworks that are done in, well, on paper, as it used to be, right, in the past. So universities are especially going to look at this score. Now, there is something interesting, actually, that we had not discussed previously. Some universities actually, instead of looking at the overall score you get, they look at a specific sections. For example, I remember that when I was applying to American universities, there was a university, I'm not sure if it was Duke University. I think it was Duke University, right? Yes. That actually required me to have more than 25 in the writing section. And the other sections, they basically didn't mention anything about it. I guess that they were not that much concerned about my scores on those parts, but they were very much concerned about my ability to write down in English very much proficiently. So what happens that, as I told you, it is going to be very much important for you to perform successfully in this section, because many universities look specifically for this particular part, because they are concerned about your capacities to write down in English, to, of course, do your homework, make your assignments. And well, I think that it is a very important part. All right. Well, apart from that, this section is divided into 2 different tasks. Actually, I would say that all sections in the TOEFL exam are divided that way, apart from the listening, I would say. But anyways, the 2 different tasks you're going to be receiving in this section are called integrated writing task and independent writing task. For those of you who are, well, for those of you who were part of the previous classes and that are basically finalizing these classes, because there's one group that is about to finalize classes, but there is another group that has just joined the classes. But the one that has finalized or is about to finalize these classes, they know that these words and these titles are very much familiar. Integrated writing task and independent writing task, they are basically equivalences or equivalents with regard to the speaking section, because in the speaking section you have also integrated tasks and independent tasks. And I think that we actually discussed that with the new group as well, that in the speaking task there are 2, excuse me, in the speaking section, there are 2 different type of questions, right? I remind that I told you that. The independent type of question and the integrated type of question. And that is repeated here. As you can see, the first task is called integrated writing task. And well, it basically consists, as we're going to discuss tonight, in reading a short passage and listen to a short lecture. Then writing in response to what you read and listen to. As you can see, it's basically, as I say, an equivalency of what you have done in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th task of the speaking section. So all of you who have been present in the classes until this point are going to be very much let's say, familiarized with what we're going to be doing tonight, because this writing task is very similar to what you have done in the speaking section, task number 2, 3, and 4, right? But don't worry that we're going to discuss it further. And the independent writing task, as I say, it's very similar also to the independent task in the speaking section. That is basically writing an essay to a question on personal experiences and opinions in responses to a writing topic. Well, but we're going to discuss this further, don't worry. So the third thing I wanted to clarify is this one. You'll type your responses on a computer keyboard. This is, of course, if you are taking the IBT version or the home IBT version. The only case in which you wouldn't be taking this through a keyboard would be if you are planning to take the PBT version. If that is the case, of course, fine. Everything I'm going to discuss tonight is going to be anyways useful for you because, well, I mean, we're not going to learn how to type, right, on the keyboard, but we're going to learn how to write down these essays. Nonetheless, if you're thinking about taking the PBT version, well, you don't have to worry about the keyboard or any of the information or data that I'm going to give for you to improve on that aspect. That is to say, you're typing. And remind, this is very important, dear students, remind that if you are taking the IBT edition or the home IBT edition, your test center, or also they are requiring you to use at home, if you're taking the IBT home edition, to use an American keyboard. What do I mean by American keyboard? I mean a keyboard with an American configuration on letters and numbers and symbols, because remember that depending on where you live, of course that your computer is, let's say, is set, yes, certainly, and is settled and programmed in a specific language. For example, if you live in South America, Central America, of course that your keyboard is actually in Latin American Spanish, right? Or probably gonna say Spanish Mexico. That is what normally they identify as Latin America. But anyways, if you're not living in South America right now, then you know, or if you have visited other countries, you know that, for example, if you go to the US, the keyboards are actually different with regard to the position of letters, symbols, and stuff like that, because they have an American English configuration. That is to say, their letters, symbols, and numbers are located into different places. And when you take this exam, as I say, in the IBT version, when you go to a test center, they are going to give you a keyboard that has the American configuration. And if you are planning to take the home IBT version, they are going to require you to use as well the American configuration. They can actually ascertain that you're using that. So it's not actually a good idea to try to obviate that part and not to use that on your exam. And let's say, they're not going to notice it and I'm gonna use my Spanish keyboard. No, there are ways in which they can know that, because in the home IBT version, they give you a complete new software you have to install on your computer. And through that software, they're able to know all your configurations. So as I say, it's actually very much required, and I would say mandatory, to practice this if you're taking the IBT version or the home IBT version on the American keyboard configuration, okay? So please have that in mind. And when you practice, or try to practice by yourself, of course, at home, by using an American keyboard. Right now, if you can go to your configurations, change it. If you had your keyboard in Spanish or Latin American Spanish, change it into English, all right? Because practicing on the Spanish keyboard, I don't recommend it, because it happened to me that the first time I took this exam, I didn't know about this. And I went to my test center having practiced for the exam with the Spanish configuration. Trust me, it was terrible, because I had to always raise my hand to have the staff members from ETS coming to help me, because I was not able to locate the letters and the symbols, and everything was terrible, trust me, because I lost a lot of time, okay? I lost a lot of time by basically asking, how can I write semicolon, colon? Because as I say, in the American keyboard, it is completely different how to write down those symbols in comparison to the Spanish keyboard, all right? Fantastic, so please have that in mind. Go to your settings, change them, and please practice and have everything on American keyboard for now, okay? Great. So let us discuss this. As I told you, tonight we're going to be concentrating on the first task of the writing section that is called integrated essay. Well, in this first task, you will have 3 minutes to read a passage. And this is going to be exactly what you have been doing already. Let me explain this. As I say, the integrated essay is equivalent to the integrated tasks that we have been practicing in the speaking section. That is to say, for this particular essay that you're going to be writing as a response, you are going to be like a journalist. That is the reason why, if you look at my screen, you can detect, right, very easily that the picture I'm using here is very much similar to the one in the speaking section. Why? Because your task, for those of you who are just joining, we are discussing the first task of the writing section. And I'm about to say that in this section, in the first task that we're going to discuss tonight, what you have to do is to be like a journalist. In what sense? That everything you're going to be doing is to summarize materials that ETS is going to give you. They are going to give you some information sources, all right, dear students, information sources that will be, as I say, a reading passage and a listening passage. And what you have to do is to receive those information sources, of course, analyze them, take notes on that, and to prepare a summary of those materials or information sources. Now, in this case, of course, you're not going to speak, right? Because this is not the speaking section anymore. Nonetheless, this is the writing section. And your summary, you're going to write it. I would say that in this case, you're actually more identified with journalists, because journalists normally as well write down their summaries, right? And they send that to the newspapers, publications, things of that sort. So as I say, that is your task. As I told you, the TOEFL exam is very repetitive. And that is awesome. That is, I would say, very much convenient for us. Why? Because when things are repetitive, we can learn them systematically, right? We can find tricks, patterns, hacks, and that is exactly what happens with this exam. So as I say, you are just going to be receiving material, information sources, and your only task is going to be to summarize them in, of course, a writing article. That is, it's an essay. They call them essays. And of course, I think they are essays because they have a structure that, don't worry, I'm going to share with you, all right? I'm going to teach you how to write this, so don't worry. Well, as I say, in this first task, you will have 3 minutes to read a passage, and this passage is going to be your first information source, okay? This passage is going to be about an academic topic, very similar to those of you who remember to the third task of the speaking section. And we'll have to, well, as I say, read this passage, and you will have 3 minutes for doing so. In this case, this passage is going to be a little bit long. Therefore, I think that is the reason why they give you 3 minutes. That normally, I would say that an average reader can read that passage in 2 minutes. So probably you're going to have some time, okay, that of course is not going to be necessary for you to read. But anyways, you're going to be very much busy on that time. So don't worry, I'm going to tell you what to do. But as I say, in this first task, you will have to read, first of all, a reading passage that will be about an academic subject. It can be about anything. It can be about medicine, biology, chemistry, physics, arts, computer science. You can think about it, okay? Well, as I say, you read this passage, you have 3 minutes for doing so. And immediately after, okay, you're going to listen to your second information source. By the way, here, before moving on, you may take notes if you wish, right? Very important. Then, and here's what I was telling you, you will be listening to an academic talk on the same subject. You should take notes as well while you listen. As I say, your second information source is going to be a lecture. Just as you were practicing yesterday, remember in the speaking section, you're going to listen to a professor discussing exactly the same topic, all right? Let me explain this. So for example, if the reading passage you receive, that is your first information source, right, is about Darwin's evolutionary theory. I always use this example. I think that is very much understandable. Imagine that your reading passage is about Darwin's evolutionary theory or any other academic subject. It can be about, I don't know, Da Vinci's paintings, let's say the Renaissance movement or something like that. But postulating that it is about Darwin's evolutionary theory, if your reading passage discusses that topic, then your professor on the on the listening passage you're going to listen to right after you read is going to be discussing exactly the same topic, okay? Just as it happened in the third task of the speaking section. Now, here is a detail, all right? And this is very much endemic of this particular task. So listen to me. In this task, what is going to happen is that your reading passage will be, let's say, arguing in favor of the topic, and your professor will afterwards discuss against your topic. Let me give an example. If the reading passage says that Darwin's evolutionary theory is correct, and there is a theory that actually demonstrates and explains natural selection and how organisms that are very much complex have managed to evolve and to become the organisms they are right now, The professor later on will say in his lecture that actually Darwin's evolutionary theory is wrong, and that nowadays there is little evidence that Darwin's evolutionary theory is right, is correct. So as I said, this scenario of the reading passage contradicting what the listening passage says is always going to be present. All right, trust me. In every single practice we're going to be having today or tomorrow specifically, we are going to notice that every single time the reading passage or the listening passage contradict each other. If the reading passage says something in favor of the topic, then the listening will go against the topic. If the reading passage goes against the topic, then the listening will go in favor of the topic. And this is interesting and it's very important. Why? Because this dynamics, let's say, or this scenario is very important for you to also include it in your essay. That is to say, in your essay, you have to express that there is some sort of contradiction and opposition between these two information sources. You're going to notice that this is very important, and you'll be able to understand that when we come to the task, or excuse me, when we come to the template, okay? But just know that the reading passage will contradict the listening passage and vice versa. But nonetheless, they are always going to be about the same topic, but contradicting opinions or views on the topic, all right? Fantastic. So, as I say, your task in this case is to summarize, okay? To summarize both materials. You don't have to do anything else. To summarize both materials and to make sure that everything that is relevant is included in your summary, okay? Now let us discuss some other things. You have 20 minutes in order to write down your essay. This 20 minutes, by the way, don't include the time you have for reading or listening. That is not included. You will have 20 extra minutes apart from that, okay? So 20 minutes just for writing your essay, okay? You have 20 minutes for writing this essay, as I say, in response to the question. The question is always the same. Summarize both topics in an essay. That's it. Now, here's important. The minimum quantity of words you need to write down for this essay is 150 words. There is a minimum, okay? There is a minimum requirement. And that is what I told you, that typing is very important. Because if you're not very good at typing and you're very much slow at it, you need to improve, okay? I'm going to give you some websites to go and practice, don't worry. But as I say, you have to write down at least 150 words. Of course, you can write down more. And if you write down more, of course, that is going to be, of course, valued, and you're going to receive your reward, okay? That will be rewarded. If you write down more than that, let's say 300, 250, fantastic. They are going to notice that you are very much proficient at this task. They are going to give you a higher score, definitely. But minimally, you have to write down 150 words, okay? Fantastic. So before I show you the template, let me please go to my simulator. And I want to make sure that I show you how is this task going to look like, okay, on the actual exam, so that you can, of course, be, well, understood on this, okay? Just give me a second, and you're going to have time for making questions later, don't worry. But before we do that, let me show you here the, how is this going to look like, okay? So the integrated essay is the first task. All right, so let me show you. So when you get into this task, this is the first thing you will see. Some instructions, etc. You read them, but anyways, it is not necessary for you to read them because you know what to do, right? So you can just skip this. All right. So as I say, first thing you're going to receive a reading passage. As you can see, it's a long passage in this case. Well, as you can see, it's not as short as in the past. It's long. All right. Well, how much time you have to read this passage? That in this case, as you can see, it's about, American literature of the early 20th century. You have 3 minutes, okay? And you will always have a chronometer, okay? As you can see, for example, here on my right superior corner, there is a chronometer, right? But on the exam, the chronometer will be going backwards. That is to say, 3 minutes, 2 minutes and 59, 2 minutes and 58, 2 minutes and 57, etc. Okay? So as I say, you will be able to know how much time you're using, and you have to read this in a maximum of 3 minutes, okay? I recommend you here, if you finalize reading this before the 3 minutes are over, my recommendation to your students is begin to think, and of course to write down on your papers, okay, that you're using as a notebook, or in which you are taking your notes. I recommend you to start thinking what is going to be your summary of this, because remember, your task is to summarize this. And of course, you're not going to mention everything. As we discussed yesterday, there are some ideas that we need to include and other ideas that are not that important, nor they are not relevant, And of course, it is not necessary to include them because no one is going to notice it. And so as I say, you have to begin thinking about what is going to be your summary of this particular part, okay? So if you have remaining time, continue writing down on your notes what is going to be your summary of this reading passage, okay? That is my recommendation. Of course, you have the chance to skip. If you finalize, let's say in 2 minutes and you don't want to hear anymore, you can press, as you can see here, next, all right? This is the how this is going to look on the exam. It's very similar. There's going to be a button that says next. And if you finalize this before the 2 minutes are over and you want to move on, you press next, all right? Well, when you press next or when your time is over, the computer, of course, will take you automatically to this part. And as you can see, it's a lecture, all right? Well, this lecture is going to be about the same topic. Let us listen just some seconds.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read about.
All right, so the essay that you all read last week, well, it's very likely that the author of that essay simply didn't like Stein's style. The reasons given in that text kind of point to the author's biases.
All right, well, if you listened, the professor is actually saying, right, the article that you read, and when she refers to that, it's exactly this article, the one that you have read, right? This one. And let me tell you, I have read this. And in this article, they basically argue against an American writer. They say that this writer was actually garbage and that she didn't know how to write and she was not influential. Basically, they criticize her very much, okay, in this essay. We're not going to read it, of course, right now. But as I say, they criticize this author. Now, as you can see in the lecture, the professor is starting to defend her, right? She says, that article you read, that is the one that you have read, was actually incorrect, right? The author just mentioned and talked about his biases. So she's defending the author, right? As you can see, that is always going to happen. That is scenario, you will always find it, okay? It's very important. Well, after you listen to this, here, of course, you have to listen completely. And by the way, just once. There are not twice here listenings. That is to say, you listen to this once and that's it, okay? That is why it's very important for you to take your notes, all right? Remember that. So after you listen to this, oh, by the way, as you can see here, you don't have the chance to go back, right? When you press next or when the computer takes you here to the listening passage, there is no button that says come back or return. No. You always have to go, let's say, forward. That is to say, you can move next, but not backwards. Okay, great. So after you listen to this, this is going to be the menu. As you can see, here is where you're going to write down your essay. Well, what do you have here on your screen? First of all, this is very good and advantageous actually. ETS allows you to have the same reading passage that you have read, and by the way, it's complete, here on your screen while you're writing. So if you, for example, were asking, will I be able to read once again my passage, even if I didn't understand everything or I didn't notice some details? Yes, you are able to read this. This reading passage, as I say, is going to be on one side of your screen during the entire time you have writing this. Now remember, you have 20 minutes for writing this essay, and this will always be here. Okay, so if you want to consult some detail or something, you can just read this. Okay, it's going to be there for the entire 20 minutes. Now, here, as you can see, we have a reply box, and here is where you're going to write down your essay. As you can see, it's a reply box, and here you can write. Well, right. In the listening passage, right? In the listening passage, we have listened, right, etc. Well, here I want to clarify this. As you can see, in this case, it showed me that, or it shows me here that my word is not written correctly. Why? Because I have Grammarly. But nonetheless, on the exam, if you were wondering this, there is not going to be a software or any other technology that will tell you when is your passage being incorrectly written. Therefore, you have to be the person, or you have to be the one who checks out your own writing. Nobody's going to tell you here you have this word that is incorrectly written, or here you have to change your grammar, or here there is a comma that is lacking. No, all those details that are, of course, grammar details, or for example, about orthography as well, as in this case, right, it's about orthography. You are going to be the one who will correct them by yourself. Nothing or nobody is going to tell you here you have to include a comma, for example, as this, because as I say, this happens because I have Grammarly. But on the exam, this is not going to happen. Okay, so in the listening passage, we have listened, right, etc., etc. Now, the last thing I want to show you is that, well, as you can see, below the reply box, you will have a word counter. And this will indicate to you how many words you are reading, or excuse me, you are writing. Let me show you, for example, in this, we have listened that an American author is actually not very much influential, right? Or something, or it's not actually very much important, whatever. Well, as you can see, as I write down, my word counter advanced, right? It is increasing. I have 17 words. And if I write down one more, nevertheless, right? Nevertheless, as you can see, now I have 18. Well, so this is important because, as I told you, you need to write down at least 150 words. Therefore, whenever you want to check out how good you are performing on this part and how well you're going, you can just look down and you're going to find how many words you're writing. Now, for some people, this is annoying. Therefore, on the exam, you're going to have here a button that says high counter. So if you press that button that is going to be besides this, you're not going to be able to see it. But if you want to see it at some point, you just press it again and the word counter will be automatically visible. Okay, this is important. And final thing, as you can see, the chronometer. As I say, on the exam, it goes backwards, not forward. All right. So you have to always check out your time in order to know, of course, how good you are doing, how well you are performing. And if you find out that everything is going well and you think, well, I still have time for writing more, you continue writing. Or if you don't, of course, you stop, you start correcting your essay, and you, of course, send it. Now, here I want to recommend you something. Dear students, when you are writing, okay, my recommendation is write down everything. For example, here, notice I have some mistakes, right? And these are typing mistakes. It happens. You're going to have a lot of them on your exam. My recommendation for you is don't stop in order to correct them. Continue writing as if everything is correct. And when you finalize writing all the words you want to include in your summary, remember that what is your task to summarize, right? Both materials. When you finalize this, at the end, you will have, or you have to reserve for you, let's say 5 minutes or 6 minutes for you to read this and to make sure that you have not committed grammar and orthography mistakes. So as I say, it's not convenient to stop every single time you commit a mistake because that is just going to make you nervous. And when you stop every single time when committing mistakes, that is going to frame, or that is going to stop your reasoning process and your ideas, as you want to, of course, permeate them in your essay, are going to basically freeze because you're not going to be able to think, right, in a very rational way if you're just always stopping and stopping and stopping and stopping. So my recommendation is, as I say, write down everything, and at the end, reserve for you 5-6 minutes, depending on your own preference, and correct the essay, okay? But before that, make sure not to stop and continue with the development of your ideas accurately and as clearly as you can, okay? Fantastic. Well, that will be with regard to this, to what you're gonna find on the exam. Now, is there any question, dear students, with regard to what we have discussed and to this point? Please tell me, I'm gonna be delighted to help you. Questions about this? Gisela, Alejandro, Ariel, Juliana, Cristobal, Sofia, Natalia, Guadalupe, Paulina, Lucia, Natalie, Cesar, Shirley, Angeline, Eric, Alexander, Camila. Questions? Right? Natalie says it's clear. Guadalupe says it's clear. Ariel says it's clear. Great. Okay. So, no questions then? Well, fantastic. So if there are no questions, dear students, I have a gift for you. I'm gonna send right now to the to your WhatsApp groups something that you will appreciate very much. And this is the let me check it out first. Oh yes, this is it. I'm gonna send to the WhatsApp groups the template that we're going to be following for the essays, all right? And the rest of this class, we're going to dedicate it for you to learn how to write down these essays. What structure should you follow? What should you include in your essay? We're going to discuss it, okay? So please look at your WhatsApp groups. I have sent it to both. And please download it in order to follow me, okay? Download it in your computer, and we're going to discuss this, okay? So when you open it, when you open the Word document, you're going to find out this. It says template writing task number 1. And well, as you can see here, you have the template as such. It is composed of only 2 parts, introduction and body. Now, on this part, it's very important for you to understand. Here you have the template, all right? And if you scroll down a little bit, you're going to find another page in which I have actually written an essay using that template for you to, of course, identify how am I using this template and to make it more understandable, right? So before I explain you this, let us right now read and listen to the passages or the materials we are receiving here for you to be able to understand me, okay? That is to say, when we discuss this essay, I want to give you the opportunity right now to read the passage that concerns this particular essay I wrote and also the listening passage, so that when we explain this, we're going to be able to discuss it together because you have already read and listened to the material, okay? So let us read the passage that concerns this essay, as I say, and it's a reading passage about the Emperor Claudius of Rome. If you have researched a little bit about him, or you are somebody who is an assiduous reader of history as me, then you know who's this person. Nonetheless, let us read what ETS tells us about him. No, this is not. Give me a second. I'm looking for a passage. No. Next. No.
Now listen to.
Sorry. Okay, I'm just about to find it. A second. Oh, come on. Probably it's gonna be the last one. Well, it happens. And okay, I guess it must be this one. No, this is the last one, as I told you. Well, doesn't matter. Yeah, well, now, so what we're going to do is, as I say, we're going to read this passage together. In this case, I'm going to read it aloud, okay? We're not going to have the 3 minutes because I think it's too much, because we're just practicing. But normally, as I say, you will have the opportunity to read this, okay? I'm going to paste it anyways to the WhatsApp group, not here through the chat box of Zoom, because it is too long for the chat box to tolerate it. So I'm sending it right now to the WhatsApp groups. You can follow me there, okay, if you don't want to look at my screen. Well, great. Let us read this together. Let's see what it says. The Emperor Claudius of Rome ruled an empire spanning 3 continents between 41 and 54 CE. His reign was of massive importance to the history of ancient European civilization. In fact, the emperor was among the most innovative, fair, and wise in all Roman history. However, because Claudius suffered from physical handicaps and spoke with a stutter, ancient authors were biased against him. Consequently, their descriptions of his time in power are almost uniformly hostile, and many ancient historians ignore all of the good that he did. Claudius' reign was important for its major innovations. He conquered the islands of Britain and incorporated it into the Roman Empire. He also built a new harbor for Rome and oversaw the construction of several new aqueducts, which brought clean water into the city. He even created laws to protect the rights of the slaves and expand Roman citizenship to new people. All of these facts suggest that he was a gifted ruler with a strong judgment, despite what may be found as histories written by his detractors. Another reason for the hostility of ancient authors toward the reign of Claudius has to do with the fact that the writers were usually of senatorial class. Claudius was not elected to power by the Senate and severely limited its traditional powers during his reign. However, illustrating his wisdom, instead of entrusting high bureaucratic positions to senators, he preferred to give them to trustworthy slaves and former slaves, freedmen, whom he felt were more loyal to him. They worked efficiently, creating a bureaucratic framework for all future emperors. Claudius should be praised for giving political opportunities to new groups of people, such as former slaves and even the women of the imperial household, including his wives. Well, there you are. So as you can see, this basically says that Claudius was the best emperor, right? It goes completely in favor of this ruler. Now, let's listen to what the passage says. You're going to find that, as I say, it is basically against Claudius. Let's listen.
Now, listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read about.
The Emperor Claudius is a fascinating figure.
He was traditionally portrayed as a vicious fool in ancient history books. But some sources, like the novel I, Claudius, which is a great book by the way, some sources portray him as one of the strongest Roman emperors. I want to interrogate that idea today. He certainly did a lot of good for the empire, but perhaps the traditional account of Claudius's reign, emphasizing the weakness of the emperor as a leader, is closer to the historical truth than the popular new revisionist account. Was he really as innovative, fair, and wise as the textbook suggests? Claudius definitely did some good things in his reign, like build new aqueducts and a port for Rome. But the biggest innovation of his reign, his coming to power by paying off the army after the assassination of the previous emperor, well, that would prove to be a dangerous precedent for the Roman Empire. It was a terrible precedent, in fact, and later, people doing the same things as Claudius would plunge Rome into civil war. As for Claudius's fairness, he might have created laws supporting the rights of slaves and expanding Roman citizenship. But, he was a notoriously bad judge, who was accused of making legal decisions without even listening to both sides of the case. He loved violent gladiatorial games, and had thousands of men executed simply for the amusement of the Roman people. He even conquered Britain to win prestige, destroying its indigenous peoples. So I wouldn't exactly call this very fair behavior. The text also mentions his wisdom, but, well, it's true that Claudius favored people like slaves and former slaves, but they were notorious for being corrupt. Many of them amassed giant personal fortunes at the expense of the Roman people, and were subject to bribery. His wives were also famous for being murderous and disloyal. In fact, his last wife poisoned him with a mushroom, and her son would go on to become the Emperor Nero, who was one of the worst rulers of world history. Claudius deserves at least some blame for the disasters of his reign, since someone as irresponsible as Nero should have never been made his heir. I mean, it wasn't very wise to choose him for a successor, was it?
Summarize the
Right.
points
Well,
made.
as you can see, basically, if the reading passage praised Claudius, then this listening passage destroy him, right? And this is always going to happen. Trust me. This scenario is always going to be repeated. The listening passage says something in favor of the position or the topic, and the reading says the contrary, and vice versa. But this is always repeated, okay? And that is important. Remember it. Now, let us get into the template, okay? As you can see, the essay that I wrote is concerning those topics, all right? So having read and listened, we're going to make a summary of these materials, but of course, following the template we have here. Okay, so as you can see, the template consists in the following. Introduction. The introduction basically has these phrases that are highlighted with yellow. As you can see in my essay here, I also highlighted those sentences when I use them, so that you can see how am I using these phrases in an actual circumstance, right? Well, the introductory phrase, or what you have to write down as introduction starting your essay, is the reading extract leads off with. Now, let me show you how I used it. The reading extract, right? The reading passage. Extract is a synonym for passage. The reading extract leads off with the idea that Claudius was not a terrible emperor for the Roman Empire, and he contributed with illustrious works for his people. As you can see, the first sentence is basically for making a very brief and concise summary of the reading passage, right? The reading extract leads off with, and after you mention or write down this sentence, you have to, as I say, make a very much compact and brief summary of what the reading passage said. And if you think about it, this is a very good summary of it, right? Claudius, the reading passage said that Claudius was not a terrible emperor for the Roman Empire, and he contributed with illustrious works for his people. That's it. Afterwards, as you can see, you have another sentence. Nonetheless, in the lecture, it is said that, and if you look down, nonetheless, in the lecture, it is said that, it's the same phrase, right? I have highlighted it with yellow. Nonetheless, in the lecture, it is said that this optimistic understanding of Claudius' authority and deeds is actually inaccurate. I am going to proceed to expose both views, right? Now, so as you can see, my introduction is basically this, right? Those sentences basically preface a very short and concise summary of what the reading and what the listening passage said. Now, if you notice here, you are going to, if you receive this and if you think about it very much carefully, we're going to notice that what we are doing here is to make a contrast. You know what is a contrast? Un contraste is basically when you oppose, right, two different views. A contrast is when something says right and something says left, right? So as I say, dear students, what you have to do during the entire essay, and you're going to notice that this dynamic, is always repeated. You have to create a contrast between what the reading passage said and what the listening passage said, because they are opposing each other, right? And you have to make sure that that situation is expressed in your essay, that you are transmitting and conveying that such a scenario is happening, that the reading contradicts the listening, all right? And we are doing that right from the beginning. The reading extra leads up with, and we summarize the reading passage, and then we use a connector. Remember that you have an exercise to do about connectors, right? That is in the WhatsApp group. Nonetheless, right? Nonetheless, sin embargo, in the lecture it is said that, so we are opposing, we are contrasting. Okay, here we had left, but here we had right, and so forth and so on. So as I say, this is always going to be repeated, okay? But nonetheless, let us continue. Any question about the introduction, dear students? Oh, but before, as you can see at the end, I include this little sentence, and I highlighted it with yellow as well. I am going to proceed to expose both views. This is a transition phrase. For those of you who are not familiar with this, I am going to proceed to expose both views. I recommend you to always use a transition phrase. Of course, you don't have to use this one every single time, but you can change it. I'm going to expose both passages right now. I'm going to discuss both passages further. I'm going to summarize these passages right now, something like that. But the purpose of this transition phrase is that your introduction is finalizing. You are, of course, transmitting that your introduction is finalizing, and now you're about to start a new part of your essay. That is your body, right? All this is your body. Well, as you can see, the transition phrase is always followed by semicolon, or in this case, colon, or 2 points, however you want to name it. Okay, 2 points, because as I say, all this is going to be your body, right? Fantastic. Any question about the introduction, dear students? Tell me, please. Something that I could clarify here, or everything's clear? Questions, dear students? Yes, Gisela, Alejandro, Ariel, Liana, Cristobal, Sofia, Natalia, Guadalupe, Paulina, Lucia, Nathalie, Cesar, Shirley, Jeline, Eric, Alexander, Camila. Okay, everything clear, right? Well, let us continue with the body. Very simple. Body. As you can see, the body contains this phrase, and this is always something that you're going to include in your essay. Firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that. Now, as you can see, of course, this is the summary of your materials, but more detailed, okay, more specified. If you notice here, our summaries of the reading passage and of the listening passage were tremendously concise, and they are not very much specific. In our body, we are going to continue summarizing both topics and materials, but we're going to make it, as I say, a little bit more detailed and specific. No more than that. Notice, firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that, as you can see, you're going to start summarizing the points made in the reading passage. Because remember, always these materials that ETS presents to you basically follow points and illustrations. Materials as the reading passages, the listening passages, lectures, conversations, they always give you points and illustrations, points and illustrations, points and illustrations. This is not the exception. If you notice, let us read what I wrote here. Firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that Claudius was very innovative. This is the first point mentioned in our reading, right? The passage said at the beginning that Claudius was a very innovative and revolutionary emperor for the Roman Empire. And this is exactly what I'm here, of course, remarking. The reading passage, or in the reading passage, notice that I'm using here the same sentence. Firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that, and as I say, I'm summarizing the first point made in the reading passage. Firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that Claudius was very innovative, right? That is the first point made in the lecture. The rest is simply a complement. As you can see, that is to say, I'm using a connector, right? He came up with remarkable works and reforms to the Roman Empire. As you can see, everything is very concise. And here I'm just complementing this very quick summary that I did of the reading passage. First point, here I'm complementing, no more than that. That is to say, he came out with remarkable works and reforms to the Roman Empire. Why? Because this is what the reading passage said, right? I'm not inventing this. or I'm not adding my knowledge. This is what the reading passage says, if you remember. So that is the first phrase. We are summarizing, as I say, the first point made in the reading passage, no more than. Now, as you can see, another connector. Nevertheless, in the listening presentation, it is noted that, right? So you can read, and let us see how I used it. Nevertheless, in the listening presentation, it is noted that the only reformation and creative modification Claudius postulated in the Roman Empire was treason, right? I am summarizing what the listening passage said, what the professor said, that the only reformation and creative modification Claudius postulated in the Roman Empire was treason, right? He said, because the professor said, what Claudius did of paying soldiers to bring annihilation or execution to the last emperor was later on repeated by other aspirants to the throne or to the empire. So it happens that we are summarizing that. Nevertheless, in the listening presentation, it is noted that the only reformation, creative modification that Claudius postulated in the Roman Empire was treason, right? And if you notice, we are constantly doing that exercise that I told you. We are contrasting. The reading passage said this about a first point, but the listening passage contradicted that first point, and they said this, right? That is exactly what we're doing here, because in the reading passage, they said that Claudius was very innovative. Good. But in the listening passage, they said that his innovation basically consisted on mere treason, right? We are summarizing that. And we are contrasting, right? Because we are making sure that the opposition that exists between both materials and information sources is identifiable, is noticeable, okay? And this is a compliment. Namely, he was able to corrupt the Roman armies and to use them for his benefit, no more than that. And this is the first part of the body. As you can see, we have summarized the first point made in the reading passage, and we have contrasted, that point with what the listening passage said, and every single time summarizing, no more than that, and complementing whenever we want and whenever we have something to say, right? Not personal, but more information to add. That's what I mean. When we have more information that we want to include from the reading or from the listening, we can include it here, but never something personal, nothing external to what we are receiving, okay? Any question about this? What we have to do here? Questions? It's crucial here. If you have questions, tell me. Questions about what we have to do in the first part of the body? No? Okay, great. Because if there are no questions, what you have to do in the rest of the essay is exactly the same, but with the second and third point mentioned in the reading passage and the listening passage. Let us read. Secondly, in the reading passage, excerpt is another synonym for passage, okay? It is pointed out that, let us see. Secondly, in the reading excerpt, it is pointed out that Claudius was a stray ruler and judge for his people. This is what the reading passage said, right? That he was a fantastic ruler with a great sense of justice and fairness. Well, great. Further, he executed justice and collaboration to slaves and facilitated the acquirement of Roman citizenship. This is merely a complement, right, of the second point made in the reading passage. He was a very stray ruler and a fantastic judge for his people. Fantastic, great, right? So you can see, I'm following the structure. Now, when we finalize our summary of the second point made in the reading passage, we contrast that with the with the listening passage. Notice my structure here. The listening passage claims notwithstanding, we're going to use that. Here we are. The listening passage claims notwithstanding that Claudius was not indeed a just and righteous ruler, or rather, ruler, I think, yes. The listening passage claims notwithstanding that Claudius was not indeed a just and righteous ruler. Likewise, he is said to have loved violence and the elimination of indigenous weak populations. There you are. As you can see, a summary of what the listening passage said about this. The reading passage said that he was a fantastic ruler, a great judge with a great sense of fairness, but the listening passage contradicted that, and we're making sure that that is expressed in our essay. The listening passage claims, notwithstanding with regard to the same point, right, that Claudius was not indeed a just and righteous ruler. Likewise, he is said to have loved violence and elimination of indigenous weak populations. Here is a compliment, remember. I'm not here saying what I think, but I'm just using the information mentioned in the listening passage to include it here, right? No more than that. And what is the last paragraph? Exactly the same, because normally these passages have 3 points and 3 illustrations. If it happens that your passage merely has, I don't know, 2, or it probably has more than 3 passages, continue with more paragraphs. It's the same. Finally, in the reading selection, it is stated that, we want to discuss the last point of the reading passage. In the reading selection, it is stated that Claudius was prompt to recognize the value of diversity in his kingdom. This is the last part that the reading passage mentioned, right? That he was somebody prompt, disposed to recognize the value of diversity in his kingdom, right? And here I come, namely, he disposed many political charges to previously own slaves and women, a practice not very common in those times. This is my summary of the reading passage. Great. Now, let's see my template. On the other hand, and contrasting, in the presentation, it is mentioned that, let's see. On the other hand, in the presentation, the listener, right? It is mentioned that his decisions were not appropriate and turned out to be harmful for the empire. The slaves he charged with power ended up being corrupt, and his wives were abominable. To top it off, his legacy brought us one of the worst rulers in human history, namely Nero. Well, as you can see, that is the essay. Here, I'm summarizing the last part of the reading passage, and I'm contrasting that with the last part of the listening passage. I'm not mentioning my opinion. I am limiting myself to summarize what the passages say. And that is the essay. As you can see, how many words we have here? Well, in this essay, we have 288. Fantastic. How many you have to write down as a minimum? 150. In this case, I exceeded that quantity by far. If you can do this, fantastic. Why not? As I say, as more words you have, if they are well written, of course, with good grammar, etc., fantastic. But nonetheless, of course, always prioritize a good grammar and good orthography, because if you write down a lot of words, 500 words, but everything is messed up and with terrible grammar, terrible orthography, of course, it doesn't work. But if you write down correctly with appropriate grammar, good vocabulary, good orthography, and a good quantity of words, you're not going to be expecting less than 25. Okay? Any question, dear students, about this? Please tell me. Questions, commentaries, please tell me. Or everything is understandable. Gisela, excuse me, Alejandro, Ariel, Juliana, Cristobal, Sofia, Natalia, Guadalupe, Paulina, Sia, Natalie, Cesar, Shirley, Angeline, Eric, Alexander, Camila. Everything is clear. Great. Well, awesome. As you can see, this is it. It's no more than that. Tomorrow we're going to practice for this, and we're going to practice everyone at the same time. So please, tomorrow, make sure to have your American keyboard configuration and to be able to access internet. Okay, very important, and to have a computer, of course. I'm going to tell your assistants, please don't go. All right, if you don't have questions, and please help me with the traditional poll that we always fill. You know that you help me a lot. Okay, dear students, please help me with that. And I'm going to tell your assistants. So if you have any question, commentaries, please express them. Okay. Now listen to your name. Where are we? Number, no, sheets. Yeah. Let's read. What we have. All right. So it's here present our dear Guzman Guadalupe.
Present.
Thank you very much, Guadalupe. There you are. What about Sonia Raquel? Here. Natalie, Nair.
Present.
Thank you very much, Natalie. What about Machaca John Ariel? Here. Grados Lucia.
Present.
Thank you very much. What about Reyes Camila? Are you over there, Cami? She was here. She was here, I know. Okay, great. What about our dear Paulina Yasmin?
Present.
Thank you very much.
Present.
M. Alexander Christopher.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And let's finalize with this new group. Melanie, Natalia.
Present.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Luis Alejandro Soruco.
Present.
Thank you very much, Luis Alejandro. What about Angeline Romina?
Present.
Thank you very much. What about Cesar Augusto?
Present.
Thank you very much, Cesar. What about Juliana Rodriguez?
Present.
Thank you very much. Shirley Karina.
Present.
Thank you very much, dear Shirley. What about Anwar, Josue? Okay, who wasn't here? What about Gisela Maria?
Present.
Thank you very much, Gisela. What about Sofia Paulina?
Present.
Thank you very much, dear Sofia. Eric Gabriel Carvajal.
Present.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Ariel Eduardo.
Present.
Thank you very much, Ariel. And finally, Juan Martín Rojas. Oh, we don't have Martin here. Well, so thank you very much for your responses, dear students. I'm gonna be seeing you tomorrow. It was a pleasure to be with you tonight. And thank you very much, all right, for your responses, for your time. See you tomorrow in order to practice. Don't forget to have your keyboard prepared, all right? Thank you very much. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks. See
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
teacher. Have a great night.
Teacher.
Bye.
Thank you very much. See you later.
tomorrow,
Bye-bye.
teacher.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you.